Here today in the Tier 8 American aircraft carrier, the USS Lexington, the Tech Tree carrier. We are on the map Islands of Ice, and we are bottom tier. So, been playing carriers for a while now, so obviously you may have seen my Midway commentaries, which are quite old at this point. So, you may know that I've long since passed by Lexington. However, I have kept her in my inventory with a 13-point captain, so I still have access to her. I am bottom tier in this match, so it's a tier 10 game, and I'm against an Implacable, and they have a Worcester, a Kreml, and a Repub to worry about. So I'm just starting the match on Islands of Ice with my rocket planes. So I'm using the F4Us, the rocket planes on the Lexington. Nice lightning bolt pattern here. Nice touch by Wargaming, thank you very much. And I'm using the Havar loadout. So on the Lexington, I prefer to use the Havars rather than the Tiny Tims, mainly because of the reticle shape, and also because of the kind of matchmaking she gets. So the advantage of the Tiny Tims, especially on the Midway, is that she sees a lot of more heavily armored targets, and generically speaking, larger sized ships, which means the 9 rockets launched by the Tiny Tims setup Midway Bearcats has a lot higher chance of being effective because the targets are a lot larger. However, the Lexington, being a tier 8 carrier, can go down to tier 6 ships, which means that she doesn't need as much of that heavy armor penetrating capability that the Tiny Tims give. Instead, the 33mm of penetration on the Havars is generally speaking more than sufficient. Of course, when you find yourself up tier like this, you sometimes wish that you had the Tiny Tims reticle, but it is what it is. Or had the Tiny Tims armor piercing capabilities, rather. So I'm just flying around, didn't really find a good first target to hit. This Sao looks like a perfectly good target now. So he's covered in 30mm and 25mm armor. Gonna use my boost to boost in. You can see here the kind of side-on elliptical shape of the Havar, which means that you get optimal spread going in from the side of the target. So giving broadside to Havars, probably not the best idea. So the Havars have the same kind of ellipse as the one you find on the Hellcats of the Enterprise. Of course, is on a slightly better airplane platform. The F4U is the tier 8 carrier fighter for the Americans, whereas the Enterprise, which shares the same rocket planes but has a 12-plane rocket plane setup, has the Hellcats, which are a tier 7 plane. Now, the SB-2C Helldiver, the tier 8 HE dive bomber, uses essentially the same 1,000-pound bomb as the Midway's BTRs. However, it is a slightly slower plane, but you still have a 3x3 setup, and it's still an HE bomb. The HE bomb does 9,200 and hits for a lot, considering that there's 2 bombs per plane. So we can tell from the Implacable's fighter plane positioning that the Harugumo has moved away. He has popped his defensive fire, or not defensive fire rather, he has turned on his AA. However, just spotting him should be enough to get him killed, considering he decided to take 2 torpedo hits. I am looking at that Zhao right now. He is Reciter Republic though, so not as attractive as I thought he might be. Yeah, at this point I am... Okay, so I was going to consider going for the Bismarck, but I think instead what I'm going to do is I'm going to slingshot onto that Stalingrad. My team is pressuring him. Oh, we also spotted a Fletcher by accident. So it'd be best if I helped them out. Nice slingshot there. 3 bombs for 6k. Not bad at all, to be quite frank. There's a Kreml there. So I'm going to launch my torpedo bombers. So unlike the Enterprise and the Saipan, the Lexington uses the SB2C Helldiver as her torpedo bomber as well. So this is also a 3x3 setup, and the torpedoes hit for a nice 6.4K alpha. So it's actually quite a decent torpedo. I actually prefer the Lexington's torpedo bombers to the Midway's BTRs. The Midway's BTR, or BTDs, BTD is the name, I believe, of the torpedo bomber. The problem I have with the Midway's BTD torpedo bombers is that the reticle narrows very slowly. You notice here that the reticle narrows actually quite reasonably quickly on the Helldiver. It does widen quite a bit when you do maneuver, but the damage is better, and the cone is better. The plane is more fragile, but small price to pay for getting a better actual reliability on the attack aircraft. So, all in all, I would say I actually prefer the Lexington's torpedo bombers to the Midways, which is kind of sad if you really think about it. I'm dropping the Kreml mainly because he's alone. I should probably just leave with the last. I'm gonna see if I can fly out my last torpedo bomber using the damage reduction. Doesn't look like it. So we did get an in cap on that Kreml. So yeah, you saw there, if you compare to any experience you have with the Midway or even the Saipan's BTRs, or BTDs, sorry, which also narrow at a similarly large rate, or slow rate, the Lexington's torpedo bombers behave very similarly to the Enterprises. Much faster narrowing of the ellipse, and the damage is much better per individual torpedo. Of course, compared to the Midway's 6 torpedoes, which each hit for something like 5.5k rather than 6.4, the damage is still comparable, but I prefer the better reliability compared to the raw performance statistics of the Midway BTDs. Here, just slingshotting to make sure I can get over the Kreml. Ooh, 2 shatters, gross. So not the greatest there. Might have to go back with the SB2Cs, unless my team finishes him off. Ooh, gosh, he slapped that Kitakaze. Looking for a strike on the Stalingrad here, so under the new AA model, you have to remember that we don't need as many planes because the squadron doesn't take damage altogether, they just take it one plane at a time. He's pretty close to that island, but I'm going to go into the attack run, see if I can use that to mitigate damage. Ooh. Was unable to dodge that flag puff because I'm an idiot. Nevertheless, you can see here the rather slow American torpedoes. I do have torpedo acceleration. 2 hits is pretty good there. So we got some shatters on the Kreml, 2 shatters, 53 millimeters of penetration, huh? So the Kreml does have some 60 millimeter armored sections as well as his heavy turret armor, so we must have struck some of that. Not sure which, but certainly we hit something. So I could follow up on the Stalingrad, but instead, I think what I'm going to do is hit the Bismarck. Stalingrad seems like he's going to take some torps, and we can follow up with our own torpedo bombers afterwards if we really need to. Okay, the torpedoes missed. That's rather tragic for us. My team is busy not being very successful at winning the game, shall we say, to put it politely. Implacable has dropped a fighter, so we're not going to get a follow-up strike here, but don't really have the striking power anyway. 4 bombs and a fire seems more than enough. Can we greed out for the Fletcher bomb? No, we cannot. Okay, my mouse is bugging out a little bit. So I need to turn my carrier hull because he's about to touch my detection range, and I'm full broadside. I don't have Concealment Expert on this captain. I would recommend taking Concealment Expert on the Midway and Lexington. It really does help you get a lot closer to the battlefield without getting exposed like this. He is taking a pot shot at either me or the Minotaur. Both of us are pretty valid targets. Okay, it looks like it was me. I'm gonna have to tank an implacable fighter squadron here to make this attack. He's on the edge of the bubble, more or less. But it might just time out if I'm lucky. I'm gonna pop my heal just to make sure I have the endurance to keep at it. Planes are pretty responsive. Gonna lag them behind just a little bit to get the right ellipse. Pretty respectable damage, as you can see. Looks like he doesn't have his damage control up, otherwise I'd probably reckon he would have damage controlled by now. That last torpedo looks good, so I'm gonna pull away. Now I'm running low on plane stocks, mainly because this is a bottom tier game. But we can't really fix that. Looks like he did get his damage control off, so I'm going to try and finish him off with the Havars. So the Bismarck is covered in pretty thick armored plates in a lot of areas. Going to pop my engine cooling consumable to make sure we get there. He did pop his heal, so now we're looking for a lethal fire. So I really need to get the superstructure or the extremities. The Zhao has launched his fighter, but my friend, these are not for you. There we go, a nice slap across the superstructure and a lethal fire. So hopefully that's enough. I cannot guarantee that it will be. Gonna go after that Fletcher. Alright, my Mimator ally helps me out there. I am gonna harass the Fletcher. I am getting shot at because I'm detected by the Zhao. This is not a good angle to approach a destroyer from with the Havars. Obviously, you can see how the dispersion ellipse is rather unfavorable. However, you can't always get what you want. So I'm getting attacked by the Zhao. I'm going to turn in towards him. I am thinly armored, so if he uses his AP or HE, depending on how he does it, he can damage me quite heavily. So I am going to try and help. Now, rockets are the lowest DPS attack craft, but just because of the speed at which they're closing, I have selected them. Especially because this guy keeps giving me a nice large broadside there. So now with him dead, I should survive. Still have plenty of my SB-2C torpedo bombers left because I have been conserving them throughout the course of the match. Our team is somehow up points miraculously. But I'm gonna need to put in some work here. Stalingrad's my preferred target, but I will go after the Republic, especially if he's engaging the Musashi and Kreml. Kind of hunting the Fletcher at the same time. Okay, never mind. We have a beached Stalingrad. I really wish I could zoom in with my binoculars, but I'm a carrier, so I don't have access to that option. He seems to be alone. So he does have defensive fire, 100%, because the Stalingrad simply can't equip anything else in that slot. So he's going to accelerate. So this is going to be an awkward drop angle. He has popped his defensive fire. So I'm going to push in all the way. It's going to eat into my reserves, but we're already here, and we can't really pull away with a Republic in front of us, creating an overlapping aura, so I'm going to come in for the attack. He's kind of hard stopped. So, but hopefully we might nail him with one torpedo. I think he might have reversed. Okay, so we were unable to get onto him, and the Republic dispatched my Kreml, which is very bad for us. This game's pretty grim. I have 6 bombers in this squadron, so I'm going to look for a slingshot on that Stalingrad. It's unlikely I'm going to be able to turn and make a second pass, even without his defensive fire, which will have expired by now. So I'm going to accelerate at just about 8.5, jamming down on the engine boost consumable. Looks like I need to be a bit closer. Still learning my slingshot timings for the Americans again because of the 8.5 AA changes and drop speed changes. 8.5, not bad. We don't have too many torpedo bombers left, but we have to launch them. Can't really reach the rockets. The Stalingrad is covered in 50mm plating, so it would not be the most effective. I'm going to push right for the cap, which my Minotaur should already have done. I really don't know what he's doing. Hard to see which direction he's going. I'm out of heals, so I'm gonna have to brute force my way into this. This island will shield me, although I did poke into a flak puff, which is gonna cut into the effective health of my planes. I tried to drop while I still had 3 torpedo bombers, but didn't quite make the timing window, so I'll have to go with 2. You can see there the slow American torpedoes kind of lagging to catch up. I did get a flood on the Stalingrad though, which is good. Looks like I'll have to do the capping myself. My Minotaur is AFK. Going to provide a modicum of air support for my GK. If he has Hydro up, he might be able to spot out this Fletch. I'm going to cut off access to that side, and I'm going to attack the Stalingrad. He did have a flood, which he put out, or damage controlled rather. I guess you don't put out floods. My GK is down now, so it's up to me. No fire, 6,000 raw damage. I am going to swing around with this last plane. It has 1,000 or so health. It's not a good angle, but you do what you have to do. Didn't quite make it. I'm out of plane squadrons, so I'm going to have to go with the Havars. So my damage is still here. We're up a cap now, but we're missing ships, and I'm running out of planes to work with. I need to hit his superstructure because he's covered in 50mm of plating. 6 rockets and a fire with just the Havars is excellent, considering it's a Stalingrad. Gonna have to go blind. Arming now in order to get a good proper distance. 2.1k. Look, I have 1 full torpedo bomber squadron left and 1 HE dive bomb. Gonna go with the HE dive bombers first, because they have the maximum alpha. So I'm kind of all in here. With 4 dive bombers, I cannot slingshot. I need 6 at least to slingshot, so we are going in manually. So if he has defensive fire charges left, well, my planes are gonna get a brutal welcome. Popping my engine boost, need to maximize the speed. Looks like he did pop defensive fire. It's not an ideal drop angle, but I am just gonna go. Nothing I can do about it. Got a fire, that's something. 54 seconds. I'll have time for one last drop, so this one's gonna have to be a good one. I don't think I can make up the points difference unless I absolutely kill him, and even then, I'm not sure. It would give us plus 50 and give them minus 50. 30 seconds. This is actually going to be my final action of the game. Ran out of plane health. Nothing I can do. Reach for the Havars. 16 seconds. Detonation or bust? Nope, he did not detonate, so bust. Man, a lot of game losses on recording these past few days, but this is what happens. It's fine though. 125,000 damage in a tier 10 game, 11 torpedo strikes, 18 bomb strikes, 3 incaps, 8 fires, 3 floods, 2 defended ribbons, 1 capture, solo capture, mind you, 117 rocket strikes, and 2 planes shot down by fighter. Team score wise, just under 1600, second on the team in a bottom tier game. Pretty happy with that performance. If we go to detailed report, 50k on the Stalingrad, 42 on the Bismarck, 20k on the Zao, 9.2 on the Kreml, 3100 on the Fletcher, and 2 Implac planes shot down. A good mix of damage, torpedoes 45,000, bombs 32,000, rockets 35,000, 5k fires, or 6.7k fires, sorry, and 5.2k floodings. So, overall, very mixed bag. The dive bombers are still technically her strongest squadron, similar to the Midway. However, the torpedo bombers are comparably much more usable. As I did mention, if we go to port, if we take a look at the modules, we can see that if at the aircraft we have the torpedo bombers with torpedoes that hit for 6.4k and do 40 knots, and planes themselves do 125 knots. Now if we compare to the Midway, her tier 10 counterpart, where is my Midway? Up here. With the BTDs have a maximum torpedo alpha of 4.2k, which is actually awful. It's straight awful. Now, the Midway does launch 6 of these 4.2k torpedoes, so it gives us a total alpha of around 24,000 before mitigation, whereas the the Lexington does 6.4, but only 3 torpedoes, so before mitigation, the total alpha is about 18,000. So technically, yes, the Midway does have a 6k leg up in terms of full alpha, but you very rarely land all 6 Midway torpedoes. And I can't show it to you now, but the Midway torpedo bomber is the way her torpedo draw pattern converges and narrows is much less responsive. So it's much more prone to being thrown off target by any sudden maneuvers you have to do. Whereas the Lexington narrows relatively quickly, and even if you do have to maneuver midway through the attack run, it is still pretty okay. So going from the Lexington to the Midway, there's definitely a marked downgrade on your torpedo bombers, which I really don't like. Now, as I mentioned, I do prefer to use the Havars with the 2k alpha and 33mm of penetration on the Lexington because of the way her matchmaking works, where she can see tier 6s. She does have access to the F4U1Ds with the Tiny Tims. However, if I just mount this and take a look, the problem with the Tiny Tims on the F4Us compared to the Tiny Tims on the F8Fs is that each plane only carries 2 rockets. The rocket payload on the Midway's F8Fs is 3 rockets per plane. They carry 1 per wing and 1 strapped underneath the belly, whereas I believe the Lexington only carries 1 per wing, which gives her essentially equal payload density to the Saipan. And as I've iterated before many times on the Saipan, I really hate having only 6 rockets because it's really down to RNG whether you hit your rockets or not. So because of that, I prefer to use the Havars on the F4Us. The Midway, in addition to seeing larger targets, which make the Tiny Tims better, and having 3 rockets per salvo on the Havars, or on the Tiny Tims, also has a different reticle. So over the course of the game, you saw that the Lexington has a nice side-on oval in terms of our Havar ellipse. The ellipse on the Midway's Havars is much more circular, so the kind of spray is very reminiscent of the Hakuryu's J8 or not J8, but the Hakuryou Rocket Plane Squadron's ellipse. So it sprays kind of all over the place in a rough circle, which makes it a much better anti-destroyer weapon, but it's vastly inferior to the Tiny Tim's anti-cruiser and anti-battleship capabilities. So for that reason, I prefer the Tiny Tims on the Midway. On the Lexington, though, I would stick to the Havars. I think they're a much more reliable squadron. The other two squadrons obviously are a straight upgrade. Module-wise, I prefer to pump up my dive bombers. They still are your primary squadron. In slot 3, I like TBM-1, as I've iterated many times before. The extra 5 seconds on your torpedo bomber arming means that you can take a nice first pass at a target at a very long distance to get a nice accurate drop lined up. And then in my last slot, I prefer flight control mod here rather than concealment expert. The only ships I take concealment expert on are the Haku and the Kaga. Although these days, since the Haku just lost her access to the 8-kilometer torpedoes for various reasons listed on the dev blog, I should probably have switched over to flight control module, because she does have some plane issues. 12 free concealment's pretty nice. What is it on the Midway? Midway's usually pretty workable. 15-4. I don't die that much in the Midway, and the Hakuryou is just as well armored, so given the fact that I can't mount the J8s anymore, I should really switch over. Not gonna demount, obviously, just gonna sell it. And switch over. Anyhow, haven't really covered the Lexington before on the channel, thought I'd jump back to it, try and get my star. Obviously the game wasn't a victory, so I'm gonna have to work on that again. However, that was a pretty good demonstration of the Lexington's powers. Definitely the second best tier 8 carrier, I would say, just behind her premium counterpart, the Enterprise. But yeah, hopefully if you're working your way through Lexington, this was a helpful guide to just general gameplay. So there it is. The tier 8 Lexington. Hope you enjoyed.